She almost cheated on her billionaire CEO husband because he was always treating her badly after birthing twins. He misinterpreted and filed for divorce. You filed for divorce because I had coffee with someone? Coffee, Marcus. After months of you barely looking at me. Don't pretend it was just coffee, Olivia. I saw the way you looked at him. I saw you coming alive for him in ways you haven't for me since before the twins were born. Because he actually sees me. He doesn't look through me like I'm part of the furniture. He asks questions and waits for answers. He remembers that before I was someone's mother, I was a person with thoughts and dreams. And I'm sure he'd be happy to help you explore those dreams. In his apartment. In his bed. Is that what you think of me? That I'd throw away our marriage, our family, for what? Some attention? Some conversation? The papers are filed, Olivia. My lawyers will contact yours. I hope he's worth it. There is no he, Marcus. There's only you, the man I've loved for 6 years who disappeared the moment things got difficult. The man who would rather believe I'm unfaithful than admit he's been emotionally absent. Have you ever felt so completely misunderstood by the person who should know you best? Have you watched the love of your life walk away over a misunderstanding too pride-filled to correct? Today's story explores what happens when fear masquerades as indifference, when silence breeds suspicion, and when two people who once shared everything can't seem to find their way back to each other. If you've ever struggled to be seen, to be heard, to be understood by someone you love, this story might just break your heart before putting it back together again. If you believe in second chances and the power of real communication, stick with me until the end. The journey may be painful, but I promise it's worth every step. The clock read 3:17 a.m. when Aurora's cries pierced the darkness. Olivia Morgan was already awake, staring at the ceiling as she had been for hours. 3 months of this routine had taught her that Aurora would wake first, followed by Aiden approximately 7 minutes later, as if the twins had coordinated their assault on sleep. She slipped from beneath the covers, feet finding her slippers by memory in the darkness. The space beside her remained untouched, the pillows still perfectly arranged, the sheets cold and smooth. Marcus hadn't come home again. Aurora's cries escalated as Olivia padded down the hallway of their penthouse apartment. The nursery was bathed in soft moonlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering Manhattan skyline. In daylight, the view was worth millions. At 3 a.m., it was just a reminder of how small and alone she felt. "Shoo, I'm here, sweet girl," Olivia whispered, lifting her daughter from the crib. Aurora's face was red with effort, tiny fists clenched in protest against the world. "Mama's here." As predicted, Aiden began to fuss in the adjacent crib. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, summoning strength from reserves that had been depleted weeks ago. With practiced movements, she settled into the custom glider with Aurora and reached one arm into Aiden's crib, her fingers finding his small hand. "It's okay, little man. Your turn is coming." Her phone sat on the side table, screen dark and silent. No messages from Marcus. No explanation for his absence. No indication that he even remembered he had a wife and 2 3-month-old babies waiting at home. Olivia looked down at Aurora, whose angry cries had softened to whimpers as she nursed. Her daughter's eyelashes were impossibly long against her cheeks, her tiny fingers flexing against Olivia's skin. The love that flooded through her was so powerful it hurt, a physical ache that expanded until it felt like her chest might crack open. "Your daddy loves you," she whispered, though the words felt hollow. "He's building something important for your future, something bigger than all of us." But was it bigger than this? Than the weight of Aurora in her arms and the soft sounds of Aiden waiting his turn? Than the family they had created and the promises they had made? The morning light filtered through the wide windows of their penthouse apartment, casting long shadows across Olivia Morgan's exhausted face. The twins were finally sleeping simultaneously, a rare gift that should have allowed her a few precious moments of rest. Instead, she stood in their bedroom, watching Marcus prepare for another day at his empire. "Will you be home for dinner tonight?" Olivia asked as Marcus adjusted his tie before the bedroom mirror, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a custom charcoal suit that cost more than what most people earned in a month. She knew the answer before he spoke it, could read it in the efficient way he knotted his tie, in the slight tightening at the corners of his mouth, in the careful distance he maintained between them. "Don't wait up," The Singapore deal is closing and I need to be on the conference call. Marcus replied without looking at her, his voice detached, professional, the same voice he used with his executive assistants and board members. Once, he'd used a different voice with her. Softer, warmer, filled with intimate humor and tenderness. That voice had disappeared somewhere between the twins' diagnosis and their birth, replaced by this corporate stranger who shared her home, but not her life. "It's been 3 weeks since you've had dinner with us," Olivia said quietly, her hands absently smoothing the wrinkles of her robe. A small rebellion. Once, she would have dressed fully before he woke, ensuring she looked perfect when he saw her. Now, she couldn't summon the energy to pretend. The twins are starting to smile now. They recognize faces. "I'm building an empire for them, Olivia. That's more important than watching them drool." Marcus finally turned to look at her, his eyes quickly scanning her disheveled appearance before returning to his reflection. "You should consider hiring another nanny. You look terrible." The words stung like a physical slap. Olivia's eyes dropped to her hands, once manicured and elegant, now dry from constant washing and baby care. She remembered how Marcus used to kiss those hands, how he'd once called her the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. That was before the difficult pregnancy, before the emergency C-section, before motherhood had transformed her from Marcus Morgan's trophy wife into someone he barely looked at anymore. "I'll see you when I see you," Marcus said, grabbing his briefcase and striding toward the door without kissing her goodbye. The soft click of the door closing behind him felt like the final punctuation on a sentence that had been forming for months. Her marriage was dying, and she didn't know how to save it. Olivia stood motionless in the center of their bedroom, listening as the elevator doors opened and closed, taking Marcus away from the family he claimed to be building an empire for. The penthouse fell silent except for the soft whirring of the air purifiers and the distant hum of the city 38 floors below. She caught her reflection in the mirror Marcus had just vacated. The woman staring back was a stranger, hair hastily pulled back, dark circles beneath her eyes, a spit-up stain on the shoulder of her robe. Where was the confident event coordinator who had once orchestrated galas for hundreds of New York's elite? Where was the woman whose passion for community building had caught the attention of not just Marcus Morgan, but 3 major foundations who had tried to recruit her? Somewhere beneath the layers of exhaustion and loneliness and milk-stained clothing was the woman Marcus had fallen in love with. The woman she barely remembered how to be. Olivia moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The city sprawled before her, already pulsing with morning energy. Somewhere down there, people were pursuing careers, engaging in stimulating conversations, wearing clothes without mysterious stains. Somewhere down there, life was continuing while hers felt suspended in this beautiful, isolated tower. "Mrs. Morgan?" Olivia turned to find Camila, one of the 2 nannies Marcus had insisted on hiring, standing in the doorway. "The babies are still sleeping. Would you like me to prepare your breakfast while you shower?" The suggestion carried an implicit criticism that reminded Olivia of Marcus's parting words. "You look terrible." She straightened her shoulders, summoning dignity from somewhere deep inside. "Thank you, Camila. I think I'll take advantage of the quiet to catch up on some foundation work." "Of course, Mrs. Morgan." Olivia waited until Camila had retreated before sinking onto the edge of the bed. Foundation work. As if she had the mental capacity for strategic planning and donor relations when she could barely remember the last time she'd washed her hair. The Morgan Family Foundation had been her pride and joy before the twins. Marcus had provided the initial funding, but Olivia had built it from concept to reality, focusing on support systems for families navigating pediatric health crises. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd created resources for families in crisis, only to find herself unable to prevent her own family from fracturing. She reached for her phone, scrolling through emails from the foundation's executive director. Updates on the new hospital partnership, questions about the fall fundraising gala, requests for her input on grant proposals. All reminders of the woman she used to be, the purpose that had once filled her days alongside her love for Marcus. The Olivia who had married Marcus Morgan had been known for her intelligence, her compassion, her ability to connect people and resources to solve seemingly insurmountable problems. That Olivia had conversations that didn't revolve around feeding schedules and diaper brands. That Olivia had dreams beyond making it through the day without crying from exhaustion. That Olivia had believed Marcus when he said they were partners in everything, that her work mattered as much as his, that they would build their family without sacrificing their individual passions. Promises were easier before reality set in, before complications arose, before two tiny humans depended on her for everything while the man she loved retreated into his familiar world of acquisitions and expansions and market dominance. A soft cry from the nursery monitor interrupted her thoughts. One of the twins was stirring. The momentary respite was over, the cycle beginning again. Olivia squared her shoulders and stood, leaving behind the thoughts of who she had been to focus on who she was now. A mother doing her best, a wife trying to hold on to a marriage that was slipping through her fingers, and somewhere underneath it all, a woman trying to remember that she existed beyond these roles. 3 days later, Olivia found herself doing something she hadn't done in months, visiting Marcus at his office. The twins were strapped to her chest in a custom double carrier, their presence a shield and a statement. She'd taken extra care with her appearance, applying makeup, styling her hair, wearing a dress that accommodated breastfeeding while still looking professional. The security guards and receptionists greeted her with surprised deference as she made her way to the executive floor. The last time she'd been here, she'd been heavily pregnant, accompanying Marcus to the company's annual holiday party. He'd proudly introduced her to investors and board members, his hand protectively at the small of her back, his voice warm with pride as he spoke of the family they were creating. Now, as the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, she felt like an intruder in a world that had once welcomed her. Mrs. Morgan, Marcus's executive assistant, Eleanor, stood abruptly, surprise evident in her expression. "We weren't expecting you. I thought I'd surprise my husband with lunch," Olivia replied, shifting slightly as Aiden fussed against her chest, "and introduce him to his children, who are wondering if they still have a father." Eleanor's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something like sympathy. "He's in a meeting with the board right now. They've been discussing the Asian expansion all morning. I'll wait." The meeting could run for hours. "I'll wait," Olivia repeated, lowering herself carefully into one of the sleek leather chairs in the reception area. "The twins, and I have nowhere else to be." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Water would be lovely. Thank you." As Eleanor disappeared to fetch the water, Olivia looked down at the twins. Aurora was awake, her gray eyes, so like Marcus's, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with solemn curiosity. Aiden had settled back to sleep, his cheek pressed against her heart. "This is where your daddy works," she whispered. "This is the empire he's building for you. Worth every missed dinner, every night away, every morning he leaves before you wake." The bitterness in her voice surprised her. She hadn't come here to pick a fight. She'd come because, why? To remind Marcus that his family existed outside his corporate bubble? To prove to herself that she could still function in the professional world with 2 babies literally attached to her? To see if any spark of the man she'd married still existed beneath the CEO persona that had consumed him? Before she could examine her motives further, the boardroom doors opened. Men in expensive suits emerged, engaged in ongoing discussions about market penetration and regulatory hurdles. They barely glanced at the woman with 2 infants sitting in the reception area. Then Marcus appeared, deep in conversation with the company's CFO. He stopped abruptly when he saw her, something flashing in his eyes too quickly to interpret. Surprise, certainly, but what else? Pleasure? Annoyance? Embarrassment? Olivia. Her name fell from his lips like a question. "What are you doing here?" "Surprising you with lunch," she said, rising carefully to avoid disturbing Aiden. "And bringing your children to see where their father disappears to every day." The CFO, sensing tension, made a graceful exit. "We'll continue this later, Marcus." "Mrs. Morgan, lovely to see you." Marcus waited until they were alone, or as alone as they could be with Eleanor pretending not to listen from her desk, before speaking again. "You should have called. Today is packed with meetings. You would have told me not to come." "Because today is packed with meetings," he repeated, his tone suggesting she was being unreasonable. "I have the Singapore team calling in 20 minutes, followed by legal reviews of the expansion contracts. 20 minutes is exactly how long it takes to eat the lunch I brought." Olivia held his gaze steadily. The children and I would appreciate a fraction of the time you give to Singapore. Something in Marcus's expression hardened. Don't do this here, Olivia. Do what? Expect my husband to spend 20 minutes with his family. Use the children as emotional leverage in my workplace. His voice was low, controlled, but with an edge that cut. This is inappropriate. The words sliced through her. Inappropriate. As if she were some random employee making a scene, not his wife of 4 years seeking basic acknowledgement. What's inappropriate is having to make an appointment to see my husband. What's inappropriate is raising our children alone while you build an empire they'll inherit but have no memories of you in. Marcus checked his watch, his jaw tight. I have a call in 18 minutes. I can give you 10. How generous. Olivia, no, it's fine. 10 minutes of the great Marcus Morgan's time is more than most people get. The twins and I should feel honored. She hadn't meant to be so sharp, hadn't come here to fight. But the dismissive way he'd looked at her, the clear implication that she was an inconvenience in his perfectly scheduled day, had ignited something inside her, the first real emotion besides exhaustion and loneliness she'd felt in months. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his precisely styled hair. Let's use my office. He led the way, holding the door open as she carefully maneuvered through with the twins. His corner office was exactly as she remembered, meticulously organized, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing his dominion over Manhattan. Not a single personal photo or memento to suggest he had a life outside these walls. I brought sandwiches from that place on Lexington you like, Olivia said, lowering herself onto the sleek sofa while trying to extract lunch from her bag without disturbing the twins. I'm not hungry. Of course not. That would require actually participating in the lunch she'd brought. Olivia abandoned the attempt to retrieve the food, suddenly feeling foolish for having come at all. Aurora smiled for the first time yesterday, she said instead. A real smile, not just gas. The pediatrician says they're both developing right on schedule despite being premature. Marcus moved to stand before the windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him like a general surveying his territory. That's good news. Would you like to hold your daughter? She's awake. I have the Singapore call soon. If I hold her, I'll wrinkle my suit. Olivia bit her lip hard to keep from crying. When had her husband become this stranger who worried more about wrinkled suits than missed milestones? What happened to us, Marcus? The question escaped before she could contain it, vulnerability bleeding through every word. When did I become someone you can't even look at? He turned then, his expression unreadable. You're being dramatic. Nothing happened to us. Life happened. Business happened. Parenthood happened. And that means you stop seeing me? Stop caring about our family. I provide for our family. I secured your future and the twins' future. That's my responsibility as a husband and father. Your responsibility includes being present, being a partner, being a parent. I am present in the ways that matter. But you're not. Olivia's voice rose, startling Aurora, who began to whimper. She lowered her tone, bouncing gently to soothe the baby. You're physically absent most of the time, and even when you're home, you're emotionally unreachable. The twins are growing and changing every day, and you're missing it all. They won't remember these days, Olivia. When they're older, when they can actually interact, I'll be more involved. And what about me? Will you be more involved with me when it's convenient for your schedule? When I fit neatly into your vision of what a CEO's wife should be? Marcus checked his watch again, the gesture dismissing her concerns more effectively than words. I have 8 minutes before my call. Olivia felt something break inside her, the last fragile thread of hope that the man she married was still accessible beneath the corporate armor. The twins and I will leave you to your empire, she said quietly, standing with as much dignity as she could muster. Don't worry about dinner. We wouldn't want to interfere with your important calls. Olivia, for a moment, something like regret flashed across his face. Then his phone buzzed, and whatever he might have said was lost as he reached for it automatically. I need to take this. Of course you do. Olivia adjusted the twins against her chest and moved toward the door. We'll see ourselves out. As she walked through the executive floor, past curious eyes and whispered comments, Olivia held her head high despite the tears threatening to fall. She'd come seeking connection, hoping to bridge the growing distance between them. Instead, she discovered just how wide the chasm had become. The Marcus Morgan she'd fallen in love with, the man who had seen her as a partner and equal, had disappeared. In his place was this remote, efficient stranger who had no time for the messy, beautiful reality of the family they'd created. By the time the elevator doors closed behind her, Olivia had made a decision. If Marcus wouldn't make space in his life for them, she would stop shrinking her world to accommodate his absence. The twins deserved a mother who was fully present, fully alive. And somewhere beneath the exhaustion and loneliness, she deserved to remember who she was beyond Marcus Morgan's increasingly neglected wife. Olivia met Marcus Morgan 6 years ago at a charity gala for pediatric cancer research. She was 26 then, working as the event coordinator for the Children's Hospital Foundation, watching with professional satisfaction as New York's elite mingled and donated under her carefully orchestrated atmosphere. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and carefully curated floral arrangements in the foundation's signature colors. Olivia moved through the crowd in a midnight blue gown, solving small crises before they became noticeable problems, directing staff with subtle gestures, and charming donors with practiced ease. The Ashcroft Foundation just doubled their donation, her assistant whispered, passing her a glass of sparkling water disguised as champagne. Mr. Ashcroft was very impressed with the patient speaker program. Olivia smiled, satisfaction warming her chest. The patient speakers had been her innovation, real children telling their stories instead of doctors reciting statistics. That's wonderful. Make sure Mrs. Ashcroft receives one of the special thank you packages before she leaves. Already arranged. Oh, and Marcus Morgan just arrived. He wasn't on the RSVP list. Olivia's attention sharpened. Marcus Morgan was something of a legend in New York business circles, a tech prodigy who had built a multi-billion-dollar company before his 30th birthday. His attendance at a charity event was notable not just because of his wealth, but because of his notorious selectivity. Morgan rarely appeared at social functions, and when he did, it was calculated and purposeful. Where is he now? By the south entrance, looking like he's already planning his escape. Olivia scanned the room until she spotted him, tall, imposing, radiating the kind of confidence that came from power rather than social ease. Even in a room full of wealthy, influential people, Marcus Morgan stood apart, a force field of intensity surrounding him. I should welcome him, Olivia said, smoothing her gown. His company's encryption software supports our patient privacy systems. Good luck. I heard he made Senator Wilson cry at the Economic Forum last week. Olivia laughed. I've handled worse than tech billionaires with social deficiencies. As she approached, she noted the details her assistant had missed. Yes, Morgan was standing near an exit, but his eyes were moving systematically through the room, assessing, calculating. This wasn't a man planning to escape. This was a man evaluating where best to deploy his attention. Mr. Morgan, she said, extending her hand. Olivia Bennett, event coordinator for the foundation. We're honored by your unexpected attendance. His gaze shifted to her, sharp and assessing. His handshake was brief but firm. Ms. Bennett. Impressive event. The patient speaker program was particularly effective. The fact that he'd been present for the program surprised her. The speeches had ended nearly an hour ago. Thank you. We find that authentic voices create more meaningful connections than statistics alone. Most charity events rely on guilt and obligation to extract donations. You've created a narrative of partnership and progress instead. Strategically superior. His analysis was clinical but accurate. Olivia tilted her head slightly, curiosity piqued. You sound like you've attended quite a few charity events for someone rarely seen on the circuit. I research where my contributions will be most effectively utilized. Most organizations waste donor funds on unnecessary overhead and inefficient programs. And have you reached a conclusion about our foundation? For the first time, something like interest flickered in his expression. Your operational costs are below industry average. Your program outcomes exceed projections 3 years running. Your leadership team is competent, if somewhat risk-averse. Olivia blinked, momentarily thrown by his thoroughness. You've done your homework. I always do. And what about me? Have you researched the event coordinator as well? The question was bold, flirtatious even, surprising herself. Something about his intensity invited challenge rather than the deference he likely usually received. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of her gambit. Olivia Bennett, Masters in Nonprofit Management from Columbia. declined 3 corporate positions to join the foundation at a significantly lower salary, implemented 6 major program innovations in 4 years, resulting in a 47% increase in sustainable donations. Known for loyalty, creativity, and occasional stubbornness when advocating for patient-centered approaches, Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks, caught between being impressed and unsettled. "That's thorough." As I said, "I always do my homework." His eyes held her steadily. "What I couldn't research was why someone with your capabilities would choose this path when more lucrative options were available." The question wasn't posed as criticism but genuine curiosity, perhaps the first authentic interest he'd shown in the conversation. "My younger brother had leukemia when I was 14, she answered honestly. This foundation funded research that led to the treatment protocol that saved his life. Some debts can't be repaid with money. Something shifted in Marcus Morgan's expression, a subtle softening around the eyes, a barely perceptible relaxation of his posture. "I understand. My mother died of ovarian cancer when I was 12. The research was decades too late for her." The personal admission surprised her. According to the business profiles she'd read while preparing for the event, Marcus Morgan never discussed his family or personal history in interviews. "I'm sorry about your mother," she said simply. "It was a long time ago." His tone suggested the topic was closed, but he didn't retreat from the conversation as she expected. Instead, he asked, "Would you show me more about the pediatric research programs your foundation is currently funding?" That unexpected request led to an hour-long conversation about gene therapy innovations, patient support systems, and the challenges of translating research into accessible treatments. Marcus listened intently, asked incisive questions, and offered insights that revealed a surprisingly deep understanding of medical research for someone in the tech sector. "You know more about oncology research than most of our board members," Olivia remarked as they finished a circuit of the research displays. "After my mother's diagnosis, I read every medical journal and research paper I could find. Knowledge was the only form of control available to me at 12. The vulnerability in that statement, contrasted with his otherwise controlled demeanor, touched something in Olivia. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman described in press profiles. This was someone whose precise, analytical approach to the world had been shaped by profound loss. Did it help? The knowledge? No. She died anyway. His bluntness might have seemed callous if not for the quiet grief still evident decades later. But it taught me that information, properly applied, can prevent others from experiencing similar losses. Is that why you came tonight? To apply information? Marcus considered her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with startling directness, he said, "I came tonight because my assistant placed this event on my calendar. I stayed because you intrigued me." "I intrigued you?" "You're passionate without being emotional, strategic without being calculating, and you challenged me directly instead of attempting to flatter or impress." Olivia laughed, the sound genuine and surprised. "Are those rare qualities in your world, Mr. Morgan?" "Exceedingly. Well, I'm flattered, even if that wasn't your intention." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. The corner of his mouth lifted again, this time in what was definitely a small smile. Though I suppose it could function as both. Their conversation was interrupted by Olivia's assistant, apologetically informing her that the foundation director needed her assistance with a major donor. "Duty calls," Olivia said, genuinely reluctant to end their unexpected connection. "Thank you for your support of the foundation, Mr. Morgan." "Marcus," he corrected, surprising her again. "And I'd like to continue our discussion about the immunotherapy program. Perhaps over dinner next week." The invitation was delivered with the same directness as all his communication, straightforward, without pretense or social niceties. Yet Olivia sensed something beneath the businesslike proposition, a personal interest that had nothing to do with charitable contributions. "I'd like that," she replied, matching his directness. "Though I should warn you that everyone I work with will tell you I'm making a terrible mistake. Because of my reputation, 3 broken engagements and a notorious intolerance for incompetence aren't exactly promising boyfriend material." The word boyfriend hung in the air between them, acknowledging what they both recognized. This wasn't about foundation business. "I've never tolerated incompetence," Marcus agreed. "But you're the furthest thing from incompetent I've encountered in quite some time." With that oddly charming assessment, he handed her his business card, not the standard company card, but a personal one with just his name and a phone number. "Text me your availability," he said. "I'll arrange the details." As he walked away, Olivia's assistant returned, eyes wide. "Was that Marcus Morgan asking you out?" "I think it was." "The Marcus Morgan?" "The guy they call the Terminator because of how ruthlessly he fires people." Olivia looked down at the simple card in her hand, remembering the grief that had briefly shone through his controlled exterior, the unexpected hour he'd spent discussing pediatric research, the subtle smile that had transformed his austere features. "I think there might be more to him than the reputation suggests." That's what all his ex-fiancés thought too. Olivia tucked the card into her evening bag. "Then I guess I'll have to find out for myself." Their first date was nothing like Olivia expected. Given Marcus's wealth and status, she'd anticipated some ostentatious display, a Michelin-starred restaurant, perhaps, or a private dining room with excessive luxury. Instead, his driver delivered her to a small, unassuming Italian restaurant in the village, where Marcus waited at a corner table, dressed in a simple charcoal sweater rather than his usual business suit. "The owner's mother makes the pasta fresh each morning," he explained as they settled into their seats. "No reservations, no publicity, just exceptional food. How did you find this place?" "I make it my business to find excellence regardless of packaging." The way his eyes lingered on her suggested he wasn't just talking about restaurants. Olivia felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the candles flickering between them. That first dinner lasted 3 hours, their conversation flowing from foundation strategies to childhood memories, from technological innovations to favorite books. Marcus listened to her with an intensity that made her feel truly seen, his questions penetrating beyond surface details to the core of what mattered to her. Most men would be checking their phones by now, Olivia observed as they lingered over espresso. Especially men running multi-billion-dollar companies. "Most men are fools," Marcus replied simply. "Why would I divide my attention when the most interesting person in New York is sitting across from me?" The compliment, delivered with his characteristic directness, made her blush like a teenager. "You can't possibly mean that." "I never say things I don't mean. It's inefficient." Olivia laughed. "You make everything sound like a business strategy. Efficiency isn't just for business. It applies to all aspects of life." A rare smile softened his features, including recognizing when someone exceptional enters your life and giving them your undivided attention. That night set the pattern for their whirlwind courtship. Yes, there were the extravagant gestures, private jets to Paris for dinner, helicopter rides to remote beaches, gifts that appeared with thoughtful precision rather than flashy excess. But what captured Olivia's heart were the quiet moments that revealed the man beneath the public persona. Marcus reading beside her in comfortable silence, his analytical mind momentarily at rest. His thoughtful questions about her work, offering insights without trying to take control. The vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke about his fears of never finding someone who loved him for himself rather than his wealth and power. "People either want something from me or they're intimidated by me," he confessed one evening as they walked along the Hudson, the city lights reflecting on the water. "They see the CEO, the billionaire, the Terminator. They don't see me." "And who is the real Marcus Morgan?" Olivia asked, her hand warm in his. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Someone who built walls so high he forgot there was a person inside them. Someone who turned pain into ambition and loneliness into drive. Someone who didn't realize how empty success could be until he met a woman who made him want more than corporate dominance. The raw honesty of his answer touched something deep within Olivia. This powerful man who commanded boardrooms and intimidated business rivals was showing her a vulnerability few had ever witnessed. "Your walls don't scare me," she told him, stopping to face him fully. "I see you, Marcus. Not the CEO or the billionaire. You." He cupped her face with a gentleness that belied his strength, his eyes searching hers for any sign of deception or manipulation. Finding none, he kissed her, not the practiced kiss of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, but the tentative, almost reverent kiss of someone offering their true self for the first time. When he proposed 3 months later, it wasn't with a public gesture or extravagant display. It was in the quiet of his penthouse, The Manhattan skyline spread before them like a carpet of stars. "I've built an empire," he said, the small velvet box almost incongruous in his powerful hands. "But it means nothing without someone to share it with. Someone who sees beyond the wealth and power to the person beneath. Someone who challenges me to be better than I am." "Are you sure?" Olivia asked, her heart racing. "Your track record with engagements isn't exactly promising." "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." His usually confident voice held a note of vulnerability that made her throat tighten. "The others? I was trying to fill a role, create the perfect corporate partnership. With you, I want a life. A real life, with all its messiness and unpredictability. Even though I sometimes eat cereal for dinner and sing off-key in the shower." A rare, full smile transformed his face. "Especially because of those things. I don't want perfection, Olivia. I want you, exactly as you are." They married 5 months later in a ceremony that balanced Marcus's preference for privacy with Olivia's desire to celebrate with loved ones. The business world was shocked, not just that the notorious Marcus Morgan had finally made it to the altar, but at the speed and certainty with which he'd done so. "He looks at you like you've performed some kind of miracle," Olivia's brother whispered as they danced at the reception. "I've never seen anyone look so peaceful." Olivia glanced across the room at her new husband, catching his eye. Even surrounded by business associates and social connections, his focus remained on her, a small private smile lifting the corner of his mouth. "He says I help him remember there's more to life than boardrooms and balance sheets," she replied. "But the truth is, we help each other remember what matters." For 3 years, their life together was everything Olivia had dreamed of and more. Marcus's wealth and position provided the platform, but it was their partnership that created something truly special. He supported her work at the foundation, not just with funding, but with genuine interest and strategic insight. She brought warmth and connection to his previously isolated life, creating a home rather than just an impressive address. They traveled the world together, experiencing cultures and places that expanded both their horizons. Marcus discovered a passion for historical architecture that surprised them both. Olivia developed an unexpected interest in emerging technologies and their potential for social impact. But it was the ordinary moments that cemented their bond. Cooking dinner together in their penthouse kitchen, debating books and ideas late into the night, supporting each other through professional challenges and personal growth. "You've changed him," Robert Franklin, Marcus's oldest friend and chief counsel, told Olivia during their 2nd anniversary celebration. "Before you, Marcus was all sharp edges and cold efficiency. You've helped him remember he's human." "He's helped me too," Olivia replied, watching her husband laugh with her brother across the room, a sound that had once been rare but was now wonderfully familiar. "He makes me braver, more confident in my abilities. We're better together than we ever were apart." It was a partnership of equals despite their different backgrounds and resources. Marcus valued Olivia's emotional intelligence and creative approach to problems as much as she valued his analytical mind and strategic vision. They had created a marriage based on mutual respect, deep connection, and a shared commitment to making each other's lives fuller and richer. Which made it all the more devastating when that partnership began to fracture, not from any dramatic betrayal or conflict, but from the subtle pressure of expectations neither had fully examined. The pressure to start a family began subtly, almost imperceptibly, during their 3rd year of marriage. A comment from Marcus's aging grandmother at Thanksgiving. A board member asking about succession planning during a company retreat. Articles about fertility declining after 35 mysteriously appearing on Olivia's tablet. "Have you thought about children?" Marcus asked one evening as they prepared for a charity gala, his question casual, but his eyes watchful in the mirror as he adjusted his bow tie. Olivia paused in the midst of fastening her earrings. "In the abstract, yes. But we've never really discussed timing. The Morgan Foundation would eventually need a next generation of leadership." His tone was measured, logical. "And you'd be an exceptional mother. As would you be a father," Olivia replied, studying his reflection. "Is this something you're thinking about seriously?" Marcus turned to face her directly, his expression more vulnerable than his words suggested. "I never had a proper family. My mother died young. My father buried himself in work. I was raised by nannies and boarding schools." "I know." Olivia moved to stand before him, straightening his already perfect tie as an excuse to be closer. I'd like to create what I never had. The admission seemed to cost him something, revealing a longing he rarely expressed. A true family. With you. The sincerity in his eyes touched her deeply. Despite his wealth and power, Marcus had grown up with a profound emotional poverty that still affected him. The idea of building the family he'd never had, of healing that old wound through creating something new, resonated with Olivia's own desire to nurture and contribute. "I'd like that too," she said softly. "Though I'd want to ensure the foundation's new initiatives are properly established first. Perhaps in a year or so." Something flickered in Marcus's expression, impatience, perhaps, or disappointment, but it was quickly masked with understanding. "Of course, your work is important." But the conversation had opened a door that wouldn't easily close. Over the following months, references to children became more frequent, more pointed. Marcus mentioned how beautiful their children would be while they watched a sunset in Santorini. His mother asked about grandchildren at Sunday dinners with increasing directness. Colleagues with children were suddenly invited to dinner parties, their family lives subtly showcased. "Is there a reason you're hesitating?" Marcus asked one night after such a dinner, his tone carefully neutral. "About starting a family?" Olivia sighed, recognizing the strategic approach he was taking. "I'm not hesitating. I'm being thoughtful about timing. The foundation is at a critical growth stage, and pregnancy would inevitably slow my involvement. We have resources others don't. You could have whatever support you need. It's not just about support, Marcus. It's about being personally present for this phase of the foundation's development." She studied him carefully. "Why the sudden urgency?" "We have time." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with uncharacteristic vulnerability, he admitted, "I'm 40. My father died at 52. His father at 57. The Morgan men don't have the best longevity records." Understanding dawned. This wasn't just about creating a family or continuing a legacy. It was about Marcus's deeply buried fear of time running out, of leaving nothing behind but corporate achievements. "Oh, Marcus." Olivia moved to him, taking his hands in hers. "You're healthy. You're nothing like your father or grandfather. Genetics suggests otherwise. Then we'll beat the odds together." She squeezed his hands gently. "If having children soon is this important to you, then let's do it. The foundation will manage, and we'll figure out the rest together." The relief in his eyes was palpable, making her realize how much this had been weighing on him. "You're sure?" "I'm sure about us. About our family." She smiled, feeling a sense of rightness settle over her. "Let's make a baby, Marcus Morgan." What neither of them realized was how that decision, made from love and compromise, would test their partnership in ways they couldn't have imagined. How the journey to parenthood would reveal fault lines in their relationship that had been hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. They expected the path to parenthood to be as straightforward as everything else in their privileged lives. With their youth, health, and access to the best medical care money could buy, conceiving should have been simple. But month after month, negative tests accumulated, each one a small heartbreak that Olivia felt more keenly than Marcus seemed to. While she cycled through hope and disappointment, he approached the challenge with his typical strategic mindset. "We need data," he declared after 6 months of trying. The best reproductive specialists, comprehensive testing, a methodical approach. Olivia found herself swept into a clinical process, appointments with renowned fertility experts, elaborate hormone protocols, precisely timed intimacy that felt more like a business transaction than an expression of love. "This isn't how I imagined making a family would be," she confessed one night, staring at the calendar app that now tracked her ovulation with scientific precision. Marcus looked up from his laptop, his expression softening slightly. "It's just the first phase. Once you're pregnant, things will return to normal." But what was normal anymore? Their once spontaneous intimacy had become scheduled and purpose-driven. Conversations revolved around fertility treatments and success rates rather than ideas and dreams. The partnership that had defined their marriage was shifting into something more hierarchical, Marcus directing the process, Olivia following the experts' protocols. When she finally became pregnant after a year of trying, Marcus's joy was tempered with relief, as if a particularly challenging business objective had finally been achieved. He attended every doctor's appointment, had the nursery designed by a famous interior decorator, even started a college fund before they knew if they were having one baby or two. Twins, the ultrasound technician announced during their 12-week scan, pointing to two distinct heartbeats flickering on the screen. Congratulations. Olivia felt a surge of wonder and terror simultaneously. Two babies. Two tiny lives growing inside her, depending on her for everything. Marcus's hand tightened around hers, his usually controlled expression showing genuine awe. Twins, he repeated, the words sounding like both a blessing and a challenge. The Morgan line secured twice over. The comment struck Olivia as oddly cold, reducing their children to dynastic considerations rather than the miracle they represented. But she pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the extraordinary reality taking shape on the screen before them. Two babies, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Our family. Marcus kissed her forehead, his usual reserve momentarily abandoned. You're amazing, he said softly. Thank you for this gift. For a few precious weeks, their shared joy overshadowed any concerns. Marcus became unexpectedly attentive, researching twin development with his characteristic thoroughness, accompanying Olivia to every appointment, even modifying his travel schedule to be present for key milestones. Then came the 20-week scan, the one where they would learn the sexes of their babies and see their features more clearly. Olivia lay on the examination table, Marcus beside her, both eagerly watching the screen as the technician moved the wand across her growing belly. The technician's expression changed subtly, her movements becoming more precise, more focused. Is something wrong? Marcus asked immediately, his instinct for trouble as sharp as ever. I'm just checking something, the technician replied, her professional tone giving nothing away. The doctor will be in shortly to discuss the scan with you. Those minutes of waiting were excruciating, Olivia's mind racing with possibilities, each more frightening than the last. Marcus paced the small room, his controlled exterior barely containing his evident anxiety. When the specialist entered, her grave expression confirmed their fears before she spoke a word. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, we've identified what appears to be twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, she said, her voice gentle but direct. It's a condition that occurs in identical twins who share a placenta. What does that mean? Olivia asked, her hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. It means one twin is receiving too much blood flow while the other is receiving too little, the doctor explained. Without intervention, this can lead to complications for both babies. Marcus, already on his phone, looked up sharply. What interventions are available? What specialists should we consult? What's the success rate of treatment? His rapid-fire questions reflected his default approach to problems. Gather data, identify solutions, implement strategy. But this wasn't a business challenge to be solved with resources and determination. This was their children's lives hanging in the balance. The next hours passed in a blur of medical terminology, treatment options, and statistics. By nightfall, Olivia found herself admitted to the hospital for monitoring, while Marcus arranged consultations with the world's leading specialists in twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. We'll beat this, he assured her, his voice confident as he worked from a makeshift office in her hospital room. 3 devices going simultaneously as he coordinated with medical experts across the globe. I've already arranged for Dr. Levin to fly in from Switzerland. He pioneered the laser ablation technique with the highest success rate. Olivia watched him operate in crisis mode, efficient, focused, tireless. Yet something had shifted in his demeanor, a subtle hardening, a retreat into the tactical mind that had built his business empire. Marcus, she said softly, interrupting his call with a medical consultant. Can you just sit with me for a moment? Hold my hand. He looked up, momentarily confused, as if the request didn't compute within his problem-solving framework. Then understanding flickered in his eyes, and he set down his phone, moving to sit beside her bed. I'm sorry, he said, taking her hand. I get focused when there's a problem to solve. I know, and I appreciate everything you're doing. She squeezed his hand gently. But I need my husband right now, not just a project manager. Something vulnerable flashed across his face. Fear, perhaps, or the recognition that this situation couldn't be controlled through sheer will and resources. I can't lose them, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I can't lose you. You won't, Olivia promised, though she had no right to make such assurances. "We're fighters, all four of us. We'll get through this together." He nodded, bringing her hand to his lips in a gesture of unusual tenderness. For that moment, they were united again, partners facing an unimaginable challenge. But as the weeks progressed, as the medical interventions became more invasive and the prognosis fluctuated between cautious optimism and guarded concern, that moment of connection seemed to fade from Marcus's memory. The tenderness disappeared, replaced by efficiency and control. He hired the best specialists, demanded constant updates, and managed Olivia's care like a business project with deliverables and timelines. "You need to gain at least half a pound this week," he informed her during her 28th week, reviewing her medical chart as if she were an underperforming asset. "The nutritionist says you're not consuming enough protein." "I'm trying, Marcus. It's hard to eat when I'm constantly worried." Worry is counterproductive. It elevates stress hormones which can negatively impact fetal development. Olivia stared at him, wondering when her husband had transformed into this clinical stranger. "I can't just turn off my emotions like a switch. You need to try. For the babies." His tone softened slightly as he added, "I've arranged for a meditation specialist to visit tomorrow. Studies show mindfulness techniques can reduce maternal stress by up to 40%. Always a solution, always a strategy, always a way to optimize the situation." But increasingly absent was the emotional support, the simple presence, the acknowledgement that they were experiencing this not just as a medical challenge, but as expectant parents terrified for their children's future. Marcus retreated into what Olivia privately called his CEO mode, managing the situation rather than experiencing it. He spoke with doctors about outcomes and interventions, but rarely asked Olivia how she was feeling beyond her physical symptoms. He coordinated care teams and researched treatment protocols, but couldn't seem to sit quietly and simply hold her hand anymore. It was as if the emotional stakes were too high, the potential for loss too devastating. So he had walled off his feelings entirely, focusing only on what could be controlled, measured, optimized. "He's coping the only way he knows how," Robert explained gently when Olivia confided her concerns. "Marcus has always responded to fear by taking control. It's how he survived his childhood. But I need a partner, not a project manager," Olivia replied, tears threatening. "I need him to be present with me, not just for me." "Have you told him that?" "I've tried. He says he is being present, arranging the best care, ensuring every contingency is covered." Robert sighed. Marcus defines love through action, not emotion. In his mind, what he's doing is the ultimate expression of love and commitment. But it feels like he's 1,000 miles away, even when he's sitting beside me. "Keep trying to reach him," Robert advised. Beneath all that control is a man terrified of losing what matters most. If anyone can break through, it's you. But as the pregnancy progressed, fraught with complications and constant monitoring, the distance between them seemed to grow rather than diminish. Marcus was physically present for every appointment, every procedure, every midnight rush to the hospital when monitoring showed concerning patterns. Yet emotionally, he receded further into his protective shell, managing rather than feeling, controlling rather than connecting. When complications forced an emergency C-section at 32 weeks, Marcus wasn't there. A business emergency in Tokyo took precedence, a major security breach that threatened client data across Asia. He had kissed Olivia's forehead before leaving, promised to be back within 24 hours, assured her that everything was arranged for any contingency. "The medical team is the best in the country," he said, already checking flight details on his phone. "Robert will be with you until I return, and I've arranged for hourly updates." "Marcus," Olivia said, fear making her voice shake. "The babies could come while you're gone." Something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or conflict, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. "The doctors say they're stable. The likelihood of delivery in the next 24 hours is low, but not impossible. Nothing is impossible, but we have to make calculated decisions." He squeezed her hand briefly. "Millions of people's financial data is at risk. If I don't contain this breach, the company could face catastrophic consequences. And if you miss the birth of your children, what then?" The question hung between them, unanswered. Marcus kissed her again, promised to return as quickly as possible, and was gone. 12 hours later, alarming changes in baby B's heart rate, forced an emergency C-section. Robert held Olivia's hand in the operating room, his steady presence a poor substitute for the husband who should have been there. The twins were delivered safely but immediately whisked to the NICU, tiny and fragile at just under 4 pounds each. When Marcus arrived 3 days later, having successfully managed the crisis in Tokyo, he went directly to the NICU. Olivia, still recovering from major surgery, watched through the window as he stood over the incubators, his expression unreadable as he looked at his children for the first time. Later, when he finally came to her hospital room, his first words were not about the miracle of their birth or an apology for his absence, but a clinical assessment. "They're smaller than I expected." In that moment, something broke inside Olivia. A faith, a belief, a hope that the man she'd married would somehow find his way back to her through the miracle of their children's birth. Instead, he had retreated further, viewing even this profound moment through the lens of data and evaluation rather than wonder and love. It was the beginning of the end, though Olivia wouldn't admit it to herself until months later. The weeks following the twins' birth were a blur of hospital visits, medical consultations, and the gradual, agonizing process of watching their tiny babies fight for every ounce of growth. Aurora and Aiden remained in the NICU for 42 days, their progress measured in grams gained and minutes spent breathing without assistance. Olivia practically lived at the hospital, learning to change diapers through incubator ports, to read oxygen saturation monitors, to recognize the subtle differences between her twins' cries even before she was allowed to hold them properly. Marcus visited daily, usually in the early morning before the office or late at night after board meetings. He studied the twins' medical charts with the same intensity he brought to quarterly reports, questioned the doctors with his characteristic thoroughness, and arranged for the best pediatric specialists to consult on their care. What he didn't do was what Olivia needed most: sit beside her in the long, terrifying hours of uncertainty, hold her when the doctors delivered concerning news, share in the small victories when the twins showed signs of improvement. "He cares," the NICU nurse assured Olivia after witnessing one of Marcus's clinical interactions with the medical team. "He calls for updates every few hours when he's not here. He's just different in how he shows it." Different indeed. When the twins were finally strong enough to come home, Marcus had ensured every possible resource was in place. A fully staffed nursery with 2 experienced nannies, a pediatric nurse on call exclusively for them, the most advanced monitoring equipment available for home use. What he couldn't seem to provide was the emotional presence of a father and husband. He held the twins awkwardly when prompted, seeming more concerned about supporting their heads correctly than connecting with them as his children. He focused on their physical development metrics rather than their emerging personalities. He asked about feeding schedules and weight gain, but rarely about how Olivia was coping with the emotional whiplash of premature parenthood. "He's still in crisis mode," Olivia told herself in those early weeks. "Once the twins are stronger, once we settle into a routine, he'll relax into fatherhood." But as days turned to weeks and weeks to months, Marcus seemed to retreat further rather than engage more deeply. His work hours lengthened, his business trips multiplied, his presence at home became increasingly brief and distracted. The penthouse, once their shared sanctuary, became Olivia's gilded cage. While Marcus moved through the world with his customary freedom and authority, she found herself isolated with 2 fragile infants, surrounded by hired help, but profoundly alone in the ways that mattered most. The physical recovery from the emergency C-section was slow and painful. The emotional recovery from the traumatic birth and NICU stay was even more challenging. And the subtle fracturing of her marriage, the growing distance between her and the man who had once been her most intimate partner, created a wound that seemed to widen with each passing day. By the time the twins reached 3 months of age, Olivia had settled into a routine of sorts, not the balanced, fulfilling life she had envisioned, but an existence defined by the twins' needs and the increasingly rare appearances of her husband. "Have you thought about when you'll return to the foundation?" Marcus asked one morning, the question so unexpected that Olivia nearly dropped the bottle she was preparing. "Return to work?" The twins are barely 3 months old, for weeks-adjusted age. "They have excellent care," Marcus pointed out, nodding toward the nanny who was gently rocking Aiden. "And the foundation board has been asking. The interim director is adequate but lacks your vision." Olivia stared at him, wondering if he had any concept of what her days and nights were like. I'm barely sleeping 3 consecutive hours, Marcus. I'm still healing physically, and the twins need consistent parental presence, especially after their difficult start. Many women return to work after having children. With our resources, it should be even more manageable. This isn't about resources. It's about what I feel ready for, what the twins need. Marcus checked his watch, clearly ready to end the conversation. Think about it. You seem diminished without your work. It might be good for all of us if you reconnected with that part of yourself. The assessment stung, partly because of its clinical delivery and partly because a small voice inside her whispered that he might be right. She did feel diminished, hollowed out, reduced to biological functions and sleep deprivation. But his suggestion that she simply slot back into her professional life as if the past year hadn't fundamentally changed everything felt like yet another failure to understand what she was experiencing. I'll consider it, she said finally, too exhausted to argue. When the twins are a bit older. Marcus nodded, apparently satisfied with having initiated the discussion, and returned to his morning routine of checking markets on his tablet while barely touching the breakfast their chef had prepared. Olivia watched him, this stranger who shared her home, but increasingly little else. Where was the man who had once looked at her with such intensity, who had valued her mind as much as her heart, who had promised to build not just a family but a partnership that would withstand any challenge? That man had disappeared somewhere between the twins' diagnosis and their birth, replaced by this remote, efficient stranger who treated his family like another business asset to be managed rather than a living, breathing extension of himself. The realization settled over her with crushing weight. The marriage she had believed in so completely was slipping away, and she had no idea how to save it, while also keeping herself and her children afloat in the stormy waters of their new reality. You need to get out of this apartment, Natalie insisted, bouncing Aurora gently while Olivia fed Aiden. Natalie had been Olivia's best friend since college, the only person who still treated her like Olivia instead of just the twins' mother. With her vibrant red hair and take-no-prisoners attitude, Natalie provided a welcome burst of energy in Olivia's increasingly monotonous days. Unlike the parade of nannies and nurses who moved through the penthouse with efficient professionalism, Natalie brought laughter, gossip, and a stubborn refusal to let Olivia disappear entirely into motherhood. I can't leave the babies, Olivia protested weakly, smoothing Aiden's downy hair as he nursed. You can and you will. Natalie adjusted Aurora against her shoulder with the confidence of someone who had grown up with for younger siblings. These 2 perfect little tyrants have consumed your entire existence for 3 months. You need to remember what it feels like to be a grown woman having adult conversations about something other than diaper contents. Marcus says the same thing, that I should get back to the foundation. Natalie rolled her eyes. Marcus thinks the solution to everything is more work. I'm talking about something for you. Just you. Not Marcus's wife, or the twins' mother, or the foundation director. Olivia Bennett Morgan, the woman with the brilliant mind and wicked sense of humor I haven't seen in months. Olivia sighed, shifting Aiden to her shoulder for burping. That woman feels like a distant memory. I'm not sure I'd even recognize her anymore. All the more reason to find her again. Natalie pulled out her phone, scrolling with her free hand while expertly patting Aurora's back with the other. The Literary Foundation is hosting a lecture series tonight. The author of that book you loved is speaking. Which book? The one about digital connection and emotional isolation. You wouldn't stop talking about it last year. Disconnected Connections? Julian Rivera is speaking here. At Columbia. 8 o'clock. Natalie's smile turned triumphant at the flicker of interest in Olivia's eyes. See? She's still in there. The Olivia who gets excited about ideas and discourse. I don't have anything to wear. Nothing fits right anymore. We'll find something. Your brain needs stimulation that doesn't involve diaper changes and feeding schedules. That night, wearing a dress that mostly concealed her still recovering body and with her hair actually styled for the first time in months, Olivia sat in a university lecture hall feeling like an imposter in her own skin. The familiar academic setting, the rows of seats, the murmur of intellectual discussion, the anticipatory hush as the speaker approached the podium, seemed to belong to another life. One she had inhabited before midnight feedings and constant worry had become her reality. Dr. Julian Rivera was younger than she expected, perhaps 40, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly appearance without veering into stereotype. His voice was warm and engaging as he began his talk, lacking the pretension that often characterized academic speakers. "We're more connected than ever technologically," he was saying. "Yet studies show unprecedented levels of loneliness. We mistake information exchange for intimacy, digital presence for emotional availability." Olivia found herself leaning forward, his words resonating with an ache she hadn't fully acknowledged. She thought of Marcus, who could manage global business deals from his phone, but couldn't sit through a full dinner with his family, who sent brief, factual texts about his schedule, but hadn't asked how she was feeling in weeks, who was physically present in their home, but emotionally unreachable. "The technology isn't the problem," Dr. Rivera continued. "It's how we use it, as a substitute for genuine connection rather than a tool to facilitate it. We've confused communication with communion." The distinction struck Olivia powerfully. She and Marcus communicated constantly about the twins' development, about household logistics, about his work commitments. But communion, that deeper sharing of self, that true meeting of minds and hearts, had disappeared from their relationship. When had they last had a real conversation that wasn't about schedules or responsibilities? When had they last connected as partners rather than co-managers of their family enterprise? For the next hour, Olivia found herself fully engaged intellectually for the first time in months. Dr. Rivera's insights about the changing nature of human connection in the digital age, the neurological impacts of technological dependence, and the social implications of mediated relationships sparked questions and reflections that had nothing to do with baby development milestones or sleep training techniques. After the lecture, Natalie dragged her to the reception, ignoring Olivia's protests about needing to get home to the twins. "The nanny has explicit instructions to call if there's any issue, and you pumped enough milk to feed a nursery school," Natalie insisted, steering Olivia toward the refreshment table. "Besides, you've been intellectually starved for months. Let yourself feast a little." "I should at least thank him for the lecture," Olivia conceded. "His perspective on proximity without presence really resonated with me." "Go talk to him," Natalie urged, pushing Olivia toward the author who was speaking with a small group of faculty members. "Your dissertation was on a similar topic. You actually have intelligent things to say." Somehow Olivia found herself in conversation with Dr. Rivera, Julian, as he asked to be called. She was surprised to find words flowing easily, her mind engaging with ideas that had nothing to do with baby development milestones or sleep training techniques. "Your point about emotional bandwidth being finite but expandable through practice was fascinating," she said, surprising herself with the coherence of her thoughts after months of sleep-deprived fog. "It connects to some research I was exploring about community resilience during health crises." Julian's eyes lit with intellectual interest. "You're familiar with Ramirez's work on collective emotional resources? I actually built on it for the support systems we developed through the Morgan Foundation for families navigating pediatric cancer." The words came easily, reminding Olivia of the passion that had once driven her professional life. "We found that creating spaces for authentic connection significantly improved both psychological outcomes and treatment adherence. That's exactly the kind of practical application this research needs." Julian's enthusiasm was palpable, his focus entirely on their conversation despite the busy reception around them. "Would you be interested in continuing this discussion over coffee sometime? Your perspective on community building in fragmented societies is fascinating." Olivia hesitated, aware of the wedding ring on her finger and the fluttering in her stomach that had nothing to do with motherhood. This wasn't flirtation, it was intellectual engagement, something she'd been starved for. Yet something held her back, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Marcus questioning the propriety of meeting another man, even in a purely professional context. "I have 3-month-old twins," she said, a statement that usually ended social invitations. Julian smiled. "I have a 7-year-old daughter. Coffee shops have high chairs." The simple understanding in his response, the acknowledgement of her motherhood without letting it define the entirety of her potential contribution, broke through Olivia's hesitation. "I'd like that," she found herself saying. "Purely to discuss potential collaboration between your research and the Foundation's work, of course." "Of course," Julian agreed easily. though I won't object if the conversation occasionally strays to literature, philosophy, or the relative merits of different coffee brewing methods. Olivia laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her with its freedom. I can't promise intelligent opinions on coffee. Sleep deprivation has reduced my palate to caffeinated versus not caffeinated enough. The perfect state for philosophical discussions. Sleep is overrated when compared to the exchange of ideas. As they exchanged contact information, Olivia felt something stir within her, not attraction, but something equally powerful, the reconnection with her intellectual self, the part of her identity that existed independently of her roles as wife and mother. On the ride home, Natalie studied her friend with knowing eyes. You haven't smiled like that in months. Like what? Like you remembered who you are. Coffee with Julian became a weekly ritual, a small island of intellectual stimulation in Olivia's otherwise child-centered existence. They met at a quiet cafe near the foundation offices, discussions flowing easily from academic theories to practical applications, from social policy to personal philosophy. Julian was everything Marcus had once been and now wasn't: attentive, engaged, genuinely interested in her thoughts. He asked about the twins not as obligations, but as little humans whose development he found genuinely fascinating. He shared stories about his daughter Sophia, the challenges of single parenthood after his wife's death 3 years earlier, the balance he struggled to maintain between academic pursuits and family life. How do you do it? Olivia asked during their third meeting. Maintain your intellectual life while still being present for Sophia? Julian considered the question thoughtfully, his hands wrapped around his mug. Imperfectly, with tremendous support from my mother who lives with us. With the acceptance that some days I'm a better father than professor, and other days the reverse. He smiled wryly. And with the constant reminder that Sophia benefits from seeing me pursue work that matters to me, just as I benefit from the grounding presence of family life. The wisdom in his approach struck Olivia deeply. Unlike Marcus's compartmentalized existence, work in one box, family in another, never truly integrated, Julian seemed to have found a way to weave his various roles into a cohesive, if sometimes messy, whole. They never touched beyond friendly goodbyes, never spoke of feelings beyond friendship, but Olivia felt herself coming alive again in his presence. She started reading academic journals again, writing notes on potential foundation projects, remembering the woman she had been before exhaustion and emotional neglect had hollowed her out. The foundation could benefit from implementing some of Dr. Rivera's community-building frameworks, she mentioned to Marcus one evening, testing the waters of his interest in her intellectual revival. Marcus barely looked up from his laptop. If you think it's worthwhile, have the team explore it. I'm thinking of exploring it personally, getting more involved again, at least on a consulting basis until the twins are older. That got his attention. You're ready to return to work? Not full-time. But I need something more, Marcus. Something that engages my mind. He studied her with new interest. You seem different. Less frazzled. I've been getting out more. Thinking about work again. Good. The foundation needs direction. The board has been asking when you're coming back. The conversation felt promising. The first time in months Marcus had engaged with her as a professional equal rather than just as the twins' caretaker. Encouraged, Olivia continued. I've been talking with Julian Rivera about some new approaches to community support systems. His research aligns perfectly with our mission. Marcus's head snapped up from his phone. Julian Rivera? The author? Yes. We've been meeting to discuss collaborative possibilities. Something dark flickered across Marcus's face. How often do you meet this man? The shift in his tone was subtle but unmistakable, from mild interest to sharp suspicion in the space of a sentence. Olivia felt a flicker of unease, but answered honestly. Once a week or so. For coffee. Coffee. Marcus's voice was flat. With another man. While I'm working to support this family. The accusation implicit in his words stunned Olivia. It's professional, Marcus. And even if it weren't, you've hardly been present enough to notice. Is that what this is about? You're punishing me for building our future by having coffee with some academic? I'm trying to remember who I am beyond being a milk machine and diaper changer. Something you've shown zero interest in supporting. Marcus stood abruptly. I need to go to the office. It's 9 o'clock at night. Better than staying here wondering what else my wife is doing while I'm working. The door slammed behind him. leaving Olivia stunned by the implication in his words. Did he actually think she was being unfaithful? The idea was absurd. She was too exhausted for an affair, too committed to her vows despite their problems, and her relationship with Julian was purely intellectual. Yet the seed of suspicion had been planted, and Marcus Morgan was not a man who lived comfortably with uncertainty. The next day, Olivia texted Julian to cancel their planned meeting, explaining vaguely that family obligations had arisen. His response was understanding, professional, suggesting they reschedule when convenient. Nothing in their exchange could possibly be construed as inappropriate, yet Olivia found herself staring at her phone with a sense of guilt that angered her. She had done nothing wrong, yet Marcus's accusation had tainted what had been a life-giving intellectual connection. For the next 3 days, Marcus was barely home, citing urgent business matters that kept him at the office until the early morning hours. When he did appear, he was distant and watchful, studying Olivia with calculating eyes that reminded her of his reputation in business circles as the Terminator, cold, analytical, merciless when he sensed weakness or betrayal. "We need to talk about what's happening," Olivia attempted on the third night, cornering him in the kitchen where he was making a rare appearance to refill his coffee before returning to his home office. "What specifically would you like to discuss?" His tone was coolly professional, as if addressing a subordinate who had requested a performance review. "This distance between us, your sudden suspicion, the fact that you think I'm having an affair because I had coffee with a colleague. I never said affair. You implied it." Strongly, Marcus set down his coffee cup with precise control. "You've been different lately. More animated. More engaged. Just not with me or our marriage. Because I found someone who actually talks to me. Who sees me as more than the twins' mother or your wife. Who values my mind, my thoughts, my contributions. And I don't. When was the last time you asked me about my ideas, Marcus? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about the twins' development or your work schedule?" Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, perhaps recognition, perhaps doubt. But it was quickly replaced by the cool calculation that had become his default expression. "I have a conference call with Tokyo. We'll continue this discussion another time." But that discussion never came. 3 days later, Olivia returned from a pediatrician appointment to find Marcus's assistant, Eleanor, waiting in their living room. "Mrs. Morgan," the woman said, her professional mask firmly in place though discomfort showed in her eyes. "Mr. Morgan asked me to deliver these documents personally and to arrange for a hotel suite until you find suitable accommodations." The manila envelope she extended contained divorce papers, the grounds, infidelity, and irreconcilable differences. Olivia's legs gave way, and she sank onto the couch, the twins still strapped in their carrier seats beside her. "This is insane. I haven't been unfaithful. Mr. Morgan has photos of your meetings with Dr. Rivera. He's also obtained text messages. Text messages about early childhood development and social support systems. We're colleagues." The assistant's expression remained neutral. "The financial terms are quite generous. Full custody of the children is assumed, with Mr. Morgan requesting standard visitation rights. He's divorcing me and assuming I get the children? The children he barely acknowledges?" Olivia's shock was giving way to fury. "Where is he? I need to talk to him directly. Mr. Morgan has left for the London office. He'll be there for at least 3 weeks and has requested no contact except through legal representatives." The clinical efficiency of it all was so typically Marcus, identifying a problem, formulating a solution, implementing it with strategic precision. Except this wasn't a corporate restructuring or a market correction. This was their marriage, their family, their life together. After the assistant left, Olivia sat alone in the vast penthouse, the twins mercifully asleep in their carrier seats. The divorce papers lay on the coffee table like a bomb that had already detonated, destroying the life she'd built. She thought about calling Julian, but realized that would only validate Marcus's suspicions. She thought about calling Natalie, but couldn't bear to speak the words aloud yet. She thought about calling Marcus, but knew he wouldn't answer. In the end, she called the one person who might understand both sides, Robert Franklin, Marcus's oldest friend and the company's chief counsel. Robert had been best man at their wedding, was godfather to the twins, and had always treated Olivia with genuine respect. "He's making a catastrophic mistake," Robert said after listening to Olivia's tearful explanation. "But Marcus doesn't admit mistakes easily. I never cheated on him, Robert. I would never do that. I believe you. But Marcus sees threats where they don't exist. It's what makes him brilliant in business and terrible in relationships. What do I do? He won't even talk to me. Robert was quiet for a moment. Fight back. Not for the marriage. That might be beyond saving right now, but for your dignity and your children's future. How? First, don't sign anything. Second, get the best lawyer in the city. Third, remember that you built that foundation from nothing. It's as much yours as it is his. I don't want his money. This isn't about money, Olivia. It's about respect. Marcus only respects strength. If you roll over now, he'll never see you as an equal again. After hanging up, Olivia walked to the nursery where her babies now slept in their cribs. Looking at their peaceful faces, something hardened within her. Marcus might have stopped seeing her as the woman he fell in love with, but these children would never know a mother who didn't fight for her dignity. The next morning, Olivia called Catherine Walsh, a divorce attorney known for her strategic brilliance and unwavering advocacy for her clients. By that afternoon, Marcus's lawyers had been notified that Mrs. Morgan would be contesting both the grounds for divorce and the proposed settlement terms. He thinks I'll just accept his accusations and crawl away grateful for his financial generosity, Olivia told Catherine during their first meeting. He has no idea who I've become. Catherine's smile was sharp with approval. Then let's show him. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, document preparations, and the strange dichotomy of nurturing two thriving infants while dismantling the marriage that had created them. Olivia moved through her days with a newfound clarity of purpose, channeling her hurt and anger into productive action rather than paralyzed grief. She resumed limited duties at the foundation, bringing the twins with her to board meetings and strategy sessions. She met with the executive director to discuss implementing some of Julian's community-building frameworks, professionally, without personal meetings that could fuel Marcus's misplaced suspicions. She began rebuilding her identity beyond wife and mother, reclaiming pieces of herself that had been submerged beneath the weight of marital disappointment and new parenthood. Through it all, she maintained a dignified silence about the divorce proceedings, refusing to engage in the gossip that inevitably swirled through their social circles. When asked directly, she simply said, "Marcus and I are working through some differences. The twins are our priority." The London air was crisp with autumn when Marcus stepped out of his company's gleaming headquarters. 3 weeks of 16-hour workdays had successfully distanced him from the collapse of his personal life, but hadn't erased the hollowness in his chest. The London expansion was proceeding perfectly. The Asian markets were stabilizing after the security breach. The quarterly projections exceeded expectations in every division. By any objective measure, Marcus Morgan was at the pinnacle of professional success. And yet, each night alone in his London penthouse, he found himself looking at photos of the twins on his phone. Occasionally, Olivia appeared in these images, holding Aurora, feeding Aiden, her face tired but radiant with a love that made his chest ache with something he refused to name. "Your car is waiting, sir," his London assistant said efficiently, "and Mr. Franklin has arrived from New York. He's at your residence." Marcus frowned. "I didn't schedule a meeting with Robert. He said it was urgent personal business." Robert Franklin was waiting in Marcus's penthouse living room, nursing a scotch and looking unusually grave. The two men had known each other since Harvard Business School, their friendship forged through late-night study sessions and early business ventures. Robert was one of the few people who had seen Marcus before the billions, before the reputation, before the walls that now enclosed his emotional life. "If you're here to plead her case, save your breath," Marcus said, pouring himself a drink. "The papers are filed. I'm not here for Olivia. I'm here as your friend, which means I'm here to tell you you're being an idiot." The bluntness was typical Robert, the only person who spoke to Marcus without filtering through layers of deference and caution. "She betrayed me." "Did she? Have you even read the text messages your investigator obtained?" "I did. They're about research methodologies and early childhood education. They meet weekly. Alone. In public coffee shops. During daylight hours." Robert sighed heavily. "Mark, when was the last time you actually talked to your wife? Not about the babies or your schedule, but really talked." Marcus stared into his glass. "We talk. You don't. I've seen it happening for months. You withdrew when the pregnancy got complicated, and you never came back. I was giving her space to recover, to bond with the twins. You were protecting yourself from potential loss by emotionally checking out. Robert's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. Your mother did the same thing after your father died. Remember how that felt? The comparison landed like a physical blow. Marcus's childhood after his father's death had been materially privileged but emotionally barren. His mother had ensured he had the best of everything except her presence. The situations are completely different, Marcus insisted. Are they? You've been treating Olivia like an employee who failed to meet expectations rather than a partner facing challenges. And now you're divorcing her for seeking intellectual connection elsewhere because you stopped providing it. She could have talked to me. When, Mark? Between your midnight arrivals and pre-dawn departures. Robert placed an envelope on the coffee table. Before you make this permanent, you should see these. Inside were photos, not of Olivia with Julian Rivera, but of Olivia alone with the twins. Olivia singing to them despite her obvious exhaustion. Olivia reading research papers with one baby strapped to her chest. Olivia crying while looking at their wedding photo. Your investigator is thorough, Robert said quietly. These are from the report you never bothered to read past the coffee shop meetings. The last photo showed Olivia sitting on their bedroom floor surrounded by Marcus's old business journals, pointing to his picture and saying something to the twins. She tells them stories about you every day, Robert said. About your brilliance, your vision, your kindness that she still believes exists somewhere beneath the businessman you've become. Marcus felt something crack inside his carefully constructed armor. Why are you showing me this? Because someone needs to remind you what you're throwing away. And because Olivia's lawyer will be serving you with her counterpetition tomorrow. Counterpetition? She's not contesting the divorce, Mark. But she's demanding full custody based on abandonment, control of the foundation she built, and a comprehensive financial settlement that my legal opinion says she'll win. She can't take my children. They've been more hers than yours since conception. When was the last time you changed a diaper? Fed them? Put them to sleep? Robert stood to leave. Your flight back to New York leaves in 3 hours. I suggest you use the time to decide what kind of man you want to be, the kind who runs from emotional challenges, or the kind who faces them. Alone in the London penthouse, Marcus found himself doing something he hadn't done in months. He pulled out his phone and looked at photos of his family. Past the professional portraits were candid shots. Olivia laughing at something he'd said, her hand protectively cradling her pregnant belly, her eyes full of a love he hadn't appreciated until it was gone. When had he stopped seeing her? Not just looking at her, but truly seeing the woman who had brought warmth and purpose to his previously isolated existence? When had his fear of loss transformed into a self-fulfilling prophecy, pushing away the very person he couldn't bear to lose? The New York penthouse was quiet when Marcus entered, using his key despite knowing he might no longer be welcome. The lights were dimmed, and for a moment he thought no one was home. Then he heard it. Olivia's voice coming from the nursery, singing softly to the twins. He moved silently down the hallway, stopping at the doorway to watch unseen. She looked different, thinner than she should be, her hair shorter in a style that framed her face beautifully, wearing clothes that were simple but elegant rather than the sweatpants and nursing tops he'd grown accustomed to seeing her in. And that's how your daddy revolutionized supply chain management with blockchain technology, she was saying to the babies as she folded tiny clothes. He sees solutions where others see only problems. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She was still telling them about him, still making him a presence in their lives despite everything. He would be so proud of how you tracked the mobile with your eyes today, Aiden, she continued. And Aurora, your grip strength is exactly what Daddy would expect from a future CEO. She gets that from you, Marcus said quietly from the doorway. Olivia's head snapped up, her expression moving from shock to wariness. You're back. I am. The lawyers are handling everything. You didn't need to come here. I didn't come for the lawyers. Marcus moved into the room, his eyes drawn to the twins who had grown noticeably in the weeks he'd been gone. I came because I made a mistake. Olivia's posture stiffened. Which mistake would that be? Accusing me of infidelity? Filing for divorce without a conversation? Or abandoning your children emotionally since before they were born? Her directness surprised him. The Olivia he'd left behind would have been more cautious, more deferential to his moods. All of them, he admitted. Starting with how I handled the pregnancy complications. You didn't handle them. You managed them like a business problem. then checked out emotionally when it became messy. I was terrified, Marcus said, the admission costing him more than any business deal ever had. When they said we might lose one or both of the babies, when your health was at risk, I couldn't process it. So I did what I know how to do, took control of external factors, and shut down internally. And after they were born? What was your excuse then? They were so small, so fragile. You were recovering from major surgery. I told myself you needed space, that I would just be in the way. He moved closer to the cribs, looking down at his sleeping children. The truth is, I was protecting myself from potential pain by creating distance, just like my mother did after my father died. Olivia's expression softened slightly. That's surprisingly self-aware. Robert can be brutally honest when necessary. Marcus hesitated, then asked, "May I hold one of them?" Olivia studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Aurora is a lighter sleeper. Take Aiden. With more care than he'd ever shown in handling anything, Marcus lifted his son from the crib. The baby stirred but didn't wake, his tiny body fitting perfectly against Marcus's chest. "He's heavier than I remember," Marcus whispered. "They're both thriving now." Olivia's voice held pride despite the tension between them. "The pediatrician says they've caught up developmentally despite their premature birth. Because of you. Because they're fighters. Like both their parents." Marcus looked up from his son's face to meet Olivia's eyes. "I don't want the divorce. You filed the papers, Marcus. You accused me of betraying you when all I did was try to remember who I was beyond motherhood. I was wrong. Jealous and insecure and wrong. You destroyed my trust. How can we come back from that?" Marcus gently placed Aiden back in his crib, then turned to face Olivia fully. "I don't know, but I want to try. Not just for the twins, but for us, for the partnership we built and the love I threw away out of fear." "Love?" Olivia's laugh was soft but bitter. "You haven't looked at me with love since the twins were diagnosed with TTS. You've looked through me, past me, occasionally at me with disappointment, but not with love. Because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. The admission felt like giving away a vital organ. If I let myself feel everything, the fear when you were hospitalized, the helplessness watching the twins struggle, the overwhelming love that makes me vulnerable, I might break. And Marcus Morgan doesn't break. Everyone breaks, Marcus. The question is whether you let someone help put you back together." She was standing closer now, close enough that he could see the new lines of determination around her mouth, the strength that had always been there, but was now more visible, tempered by challenge. "I don't deserve another chance," he said honestly. "No, you don't." Her directness was refreshing after months of emotional distance. "But the twins deserve a father who's present. And I deserve the right to choose my own path forward. What do you want, Olivia? Tell me, and I'll make it happen." "That's your problem. You think you can fix everything with money or power or influence." She moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "I want a partner, not a provider. I want someone who sees me as whole and complete, whether I'm covered in baby spit up or running a board meeting. I want what we had before you got scared and ran away emotionally. I want that too." Marcus joined her at the window, careful to maintain space between them. "I can't promise I won't be afraid again, but I can promise to talk about it instead of withdrawing. To be present even when it's painful. To see you, really see you, every day." Olivia turned to face him, her expression guarded but not closed. "Words are easy, Marcus. You've always been persuasive. Then let me show you. Day by day, moment by moment." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "Move back home. Or let me move back in. We'll go to counseling, set boundaries, rebuild from the foundation up. And Julian? If he's important to your intellectual life, then he has a place in it." I overreacted out of insecurity, not because there was anything inappropriate happening. Olivia studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his for deception or manipulation. "Finally," she said, "the guest room has fresh sheets. We can start there." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even acceptance. But it was an opening, a chance to prove that his realizations weren't just a reaction to losing control of the situation. "Thank you," he said simply. As if on cue, Aurora began to fuss in her crib. Olivia moved automatically to tend to her, but Marcus gently touched her arm. "Let me," he said. "You've been doing this alone for too long." Watching him awkwardly but determinedly change his daughter's diaper, Olivia felt something shift within her, not trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of possibility. The journey back to each other would be long and uncertain, requiring more vulnerability than either had shown before. But as Marcus cradled Aurora against his chest, murmuring promises that Olivia hoped he would keep, she allowed herself to imagine a future where they were both seen and known completely, scars, strengths, and all the beautiful imperfections that make love real instead of idealized. 3 weeks later, Olivia woke to the unfamiliar sound of Marcus's voice drifting through the baby monitor. Checking the time, 3:17 a.m. She felt a momentary panic before realizing he must have heard one of the twins and gone to check on them. "Your mom deserves to sleep through the night occasionally," he was saying softly. "So it's just you and me, Aurora. What shall we discuss? Stock market projections? Too boring. The Singapore expansion? Too complex. How about I tell you about the first time I met your mother?" Olivia lay still, listening as Marcus recounted their meeting at the charity gala to their infant daughter. His voice was different, warmer, more intimate than she'd heard in months, with none of the clipped efficiency that characterized his business persona. "She wasn't impressed by my research, you know. Most people are intimidated when they realize I've investigated them. Your mother just raised her eyebrow and asked if I'd found anything interesting. That's when I knew she was special. She wasn't afraid of me." The tenderness in his tone made Olivia's throat tighten. This was the Marcus she'd fallen in love with, the man who had been buried beneath layers of fear and control for so long she'd begun to doubt his existence. "I think I forgot that for a while," he continued, unaware of his audience. "How special she is. How lucky I am. I got scared of losing what mattered most and ended up pushing it away instead." A pause. "That was a pretty big mistake, Aurora. One I'm trying to fix now." Olivia closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. It wasn't a grand declaration or dramatic gesture. It was simply truth, spoken in the quiet darkness to an infant who couldn't understand the words but perhaps felt the emotion behind them. For the past 3 weeks, Marcus had been meticulously keeping his promises. He'd adjusted his work schedule to be home for dinner every night. He'd attended every pediatrician appointment. He'd hired an executive coach specializing in work-life integration and started therapy to address the patterns inherited from his emotionally distant mother. Most importantly, he'd been present, not just physically in the room, but emotionally engaged with both Olivia and the twins. He asked questions about their days and actually listened to the answers. He shared his thoughts and concerns rather than retreating behind work when things became emotionally challenging. He was learning, slowly but steadily, how to be the partner and father he'd always wanted to be but hadn't known how to become. There were still tense moments, misunderstandings, the occasional retreat into old patterns when stress peaked. But those instances were now followed by recognition and correction rather than escalation and distance. "I think she's asleep," Marcus whispered, the monitor capturing the soft sound of him placing Aurora back in her crib. "Sweet dreams, little one. Daddy loves you." The next morning over breakfast, Olivia said casually, "You handled Aurora's middle-of-the-night wake-up well." Marcus looked up from his coffee, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "You heard that. Baby monitors are remarkably effective surveillance devices. I suppose I should be more careful about what state secrets I divulge during diaper changes." Olivia smiled. "I liked your story about how we met, though you left out the part where you basically admitted to stalking me before the event." Background research. Marcus corrected with a hint of his old arrogance, though his eyes were warm with humor, and clearly justified, given the results. Clearly. They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments before Marcus spoke again, his tone more serious. "I meant what I said last night. About forgetting how special you are. About trying to fix my mistakes. I know you did." Olivia reached across the table to take his hand. "And I'm beginning to believe you." "Just beginning? Trust takes time to rebuild, especially after it's been broken so thoroughly." Marcus nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "I have a meeting with the board at 10, but I was thinking we could take the twins to the park this afternoon, if you're free." The simple suggestion, so normal for most families, so unprecedented in theirs, felt like another small step toward the partnership they were trying to reconstruct. "I'd like that," Olivia said. "And afterward, maybe we could discuss those foundation initiatives I've been working on. I'd value your input on the implementation strategy." "I'd be honored." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. Partners in all things again. We're getting there, Olivia replied. One day at a time. As Marcus left for his meeting, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead on his way out, Olivia felt a cautious hope bloom within her. The man she'd married was finding his way back to her, and she was rediscovering the woman she'd been before grief and distance had hollowed her out. Their path forward wouldn't be easy or straightforward. Real healing rarely was. But in the quiet moments between crises and complications, in the small choices to turn toward each other rather than away, they were building something potentially stronger than what they'd lost. A partnership tempered by challenge, a love deepened by forgiveness, and a family bound not just by DNA, but by daily, deliberate connection. 6 months later, Olivia stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching as Marcus read a bedtime story to the twins. At 9 months old, Aurora and Aiden were alert, engaged little people now, babbling responses to their father's animated narration. And the little bear found his way home, Marcus concluded, closing the book as Aurora patted the final page with approval. Because home isn't just a place, it's where your heart belongs. Profound literary analysis from the man who once called fiction an inefficient delivery system for information, Olivia teased, entering the room to help settle the twins for the night. Marcus smiled, the expression now comfortably familiar on a face that had once been known for its stoicism. I've discovered there are multiple forms of efficiency, some measured in productivity metrics, others in the light in a child's eyes when they recognize a favorite story. As they tucked the twins into their cribs, their movements had the synchronized rhythm of parents who had found their groove together. What had once been awkward parallel efforts had evolved into seamless teamwork, each anticipating the other's needs without words. Later, sitting on the terrace with glasses of wine, the city lights spreading before them like a reflection of the stars above, Olivia felt a contentment she'd once feared was permanently lost. The Foundation Board approved the Community Resilience Initiative today, she said. We'll be implementing Julian's research framework in 3 pilot locations next quarter. That's wonderful. Your presentation must have been compelling. It helped that the CEO of Morgan Technologies gave it his enthusiastic endorsement. She smiled, remembering how Marcus had spoken passionately to the board about the initiative's potential impact, deferring to Olivia's expertise while providing his full support. Their professional lives had found a new balance. Olivia working part-time at the foundation while the twins were cared for by a nanny 3 days a week. Marcus restructuring his schedule to prioritize family while still leading his company effectively. The integration wasn't perfect, but it was intentional, a constant work in progress that they adjusted together rather than in opposition. I ran into Julian after the board meeting, Olivia mentioned. He asked if we'd bring the twins to Sophia's birthday party next weekend. Apparently, she's fascinated by babies. That would be nice, Marcus replied, his acceptance genuine rather than forced. Over the months, as trust had been rebuilt between them, his irrational jealousy had faded. He'd even met Julian at a foundation event, the two men finding common ground in their intellectual interests despite the awkward history. Remember when you thought I was having an affair with him? Olivia asked, the pain of that accusation now sufficiently healed to be mentioned without reopening wounds. Marcus winced. Not my finest moment of deductive reasoning. What made you so certain? You lit up when you talked about your conversations with him. You seemed more alive, more yourself, than you had in months. He looked at her directly, honesty replacing his former defensive pride. I didn't want to acknowledge that I was the reason you'd stopped lighting up around me. And now I understand that your intellectual life, your professional contributions, your identity beyond our relationship, they're not threats to us. They're essential parts of who you are, the woman I fell in love with. Olivia leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. We both lost ourselves for a while. You in your fear of vulnerability, me in the overwhelming demands of new motherhood. The difference is that you were trying to find your way back, while I was actively running in the opposite direction. Marcus wrapped his arm around her, drawing her closer. I'm grateful every day that you gave me the chance to turn around. We still have work to do, Olivia reminded him. The counselor says rebuilding trust is a continuous process, not a one-time achievement. And communication during stress remains our greatest challenge. Marcus agreed, referencing their latest therapy session. but were getting better at recognizing the patterns before they escalate. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city below. Their life together had been transformed not by grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but by the accumulation of small choices, choosing presence over distance, vulnerability over protection, connection over efficiency. "I love you," Marcus said quietly, the words no less powerful for their simplicity. "Not just for what you give me or what you represent, but for who you are, brilliant, compassionate, resilient, and infinitely more complex than I once allowed myself to see." Olivia turned to face him, cupping his cheek with her palm. "And I love you. Not the perfect CEO or the flawless provider, but the real man, with fears and strengths and the courage to change when it matters most." Their kiss was sweet with the flavor of hard-won understanding, rich with the depth that comes only through navigating difficulty together and emerging stronger for the journey. The twins would wake early tomorrow, demanding attention and care. Work emails would need responses, foundation decisions would require consideration. The complex choreography of their integrated lives would continue its delicate balance. But for now, in this moment of connection, they were simply Marcus and Olivia, not roles or functions or responsibilities, but two people who had nearly lost each other before remembering why they had chosen to build a life together in the first place. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" Olivia whispered against his lips. "More than okay," Marcus replied with the quiet confidence that had once built an empire and was now rebuilding something infinitely more valuable. "We're going to be extraordinary." And in that moment, with the twins sleeping peacefully inside and the future stretching before them with renewed promise, both of them believed it completely. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wentworth reminding you that sometimes our greatest barriers to connection aren't external obstacles, but the walls we build ourselves. Marcus and Olivia's journey teaches us that true intimacy requires courage. The courage to remain present when fear tempts us to retreat, the courage to speak honestly when silence seems safer, and the courage to forgive when pride demands distance. In our hyper-connected yet emotionally isolated world, perhaps the most revolutionary act is to truly see the people we love, not just their functions in our lives, but their complete, complex humanity. To remember that behind every role, mother, father, spouse, professional, is a person longing to be known and valued for who they truly are. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reach out to someone you may have stopped truly seeing. And remember that love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about presence, patience, and the willingness to begin again, day after day, with open eyes and an open heart. Until next time, this is Mr. Wentworth with Lux Love Chronicles, wishing you connection in its most authentic form.